direct you back to 1 Peter this morning. If you remember, last week I kind of shifted gears, and one of the things I said is that and I'm facing so many questions from the community, from our people about so many things that we're facing in our nation right now. And Peter wrote us a letter. Peter wrote us a letter dealing with a lot of the things that are coming up. And again, not a Sunday goes by that there's not a new question that's coming before us. It's in the news. There's things that we are confronting every single week now. And so again, I think this passage is going to really hit home with questions you have, even this morning, of me and of God. Let me read. It's a long passage, but we're going to concentrate on chapter 2, verse 4 through 8. But I want to read the passage. Could you kind of think of this? It won't be on the screen, but you can turn to 1 Peter chapter 1, 13 through chapter 2, verse 8. Let me read it to you. This should come at you like a letter that was being written to you as we started last week. Therefore, so after all we talked about last week, living as aliens and strangers, okay, therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. I read that a couple times this week. He's being pretty forceful. If I need to translate that for you, don't be stupid like you were before. My wife says never say stupid in church, but in front of the kids. But he's saying that. But he says it nicely. Don't do the things you used to do when you were formerly ignorant. But as he who called you is holy, you are also holy in all your conduct, since it was written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. And if you call on him as Father who judges impartially according to his own deeds, conduct yourself with fear through the time of your exile, knowing that you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver and gold, but with the precious blood of Jesus, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. He was foreknown before the foundation, but was made manifest in the last times for your sake, for the sake of you, who through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are where? In God. Having purified your souls, there's again what brought me to this book in the first place. This is it well with your soul? Is the question coming from this? How is it with your soul? Having purified your souls by your obedience to the truth for a sincere brotherly love, love one another earnestly from a pure heart, since you've been born again, and not of a perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and abiding of the Word of God. For all flesh is like grass, and all its glory like the flowers of grass. The grass withers and the flower falls, but the word of the Lord remains forever. And this word is the good news that was preached to you. So Peter's indicating, as we talked about last time, that he possibly was the one that brought them this gospel. So put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and slander, like newborn infants. Long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation, if indeed you have tasted, okay? If indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. As you come to him, this is where we're going to land today. As you come to him, a living stone, rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious, you yourselves like living stones are being built up into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifice, accepting to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone, chosen and precious. And whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. Hear that this morning. Whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. So the honor is for you who believe. But for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone and a stone of stumbling and a rock of defense. They stumble because they disobey the word as they were destined to do. So I want you to imagine this morning, and I really went home from the funeral yesterday. We've been busy all week. This is the 9th day we've been in this house, and this is probably the smallest crowd we've had in 9 days. But we had a crowded house yesterday. We had a wonderful funeral here, and one of the things I took from that was a legacy. I didn't even go into it thinking that, but a legacy that was left behind by a woman. And so, you know what? I tell you what my legacy is going to be. I hope when I die they say that man never shut up about missions. He would not he just kept talking and talking about it. So I hope that's my legacy. But I want you to imagine this morning, you wake up and you're in a foreign land. You probably thought that all week when you were listening to the news. Where am I living? But I want you to imagine you woke up and you're in a foreign land. Only I'm going to make it worse. You don't know the language. You don't know the language. You don't know the culture. You don't know their worldview. And you don't even know what they value. It's all unfamiliar to you. You don't understand. But the good thing is we're all on the same team. We woke up this morning. We're all on the same team. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You find yourself living in that type of situation. Well, together you're going to learn to speak the language of the people. You're going to learn to understand the culture of the people. And you're going to try to understand how the Bible can interact in their lives. How the Bible can interact with the outlook that the people have. You're going to figure that out. You're going to try to connect with these people at a relational level. So you can have a relationship with them. So this is the situation that we are waking up to in the United States of America. This is where we're waking up. Okay? You think you know the language. You think you know the culture. You think you know the values. But you don't. You don't. And the culture has moved on. I don't know if you've noticed that, but just let me make that point. This culture has moved on. It's not what it was 100 years ago. And no one even here was here to see it. Miriam was close, but but none of us were here 100 years ago. And I only say that because she talks about it all the time. That's the only reason I brought it up. She's almost 100, so I won't be able to say that in 2 years. But none of us were here 100 years ago to see it. But it's changed. It's not what it was. It was shaped by the Bible story. 100 years ago in this land, the culture was shaped by the story of the Bible. And you have to take my word for it. It was. But we need to wake up and realize that we have found ourselves in a missionary situation. We cannot continue to undertake missions in the United States in the old traditional way. It's not going to work. It is not going to work. We cannot assume that people feel any need whatsoever to go to church. We can't. We can't. We cannot assume that our culture understands us as Christians. We have to operate as missionaries in a foreign land. So there's 3 things I want to say to you this morning. The first one is, we cannot expect the world to be like us. Okay? We cannot expect the world to be like us. For some reason, we expect the world to be like us and to share the same values that we have. And we get mad when they're not. We protest when the world is not like us as Christians. Often, Christians complain about the way they're treated in what's called the wider culture. You hear it on the news. It's called the mainstream. The mainstream that's flowing through society is what the news always talks about. Mainstream, if you hear that. And we complain about the way we're treated in the mainstream. We grumble about laws that are changed if they don't fit our Christian values. We get upset if a politician or an athlete or an actor says they're not a Christian or that they don't believe in God. We do it all the time. Okay? You know what made me laugh to some extent? You know, people said, I'm not going to see that movie Noah because it's not exactly biblical. But they'll go see all those zombie movies and stuff that people who aren't Christians in. But Noah changes it up a little bit, and we're not going because it's not biblical. Let me just tell you, it's the mainstream, and none of it's going to be biblical. They're not aiming for biblical when they make any movie. A first baseman, a pro quarterback, they don't care if you know they're Christian or not. If you say, I'm not going to watch this athlete because he's come out, they don't care. They don't care if you turn the game off because they're playing, they don't care. They don't care if you don't come to their movies. And now, they don't care if you vote for them or not. They don't need your vote. They really don't. They've proven it now. They've proven it. Maybe in Texas they might. But overall, so you're getting real solemn now. I think I'm getting the point across. And I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to get you this point. And so, I personally don't welcome any of this. I personally don't welcome any of these attitudes in the media. But we can't expect the world to be like us. In fact, I'm surprised sometimes, and so are you, when you hear a story about a politician or an athlete or an actor who's Christian and has done something that you find amazingly Christian. And then you say, we should buy that movie. We should support that athlete. We should vote for that politician. But it surprises me. It really does. It surprises me. So this tradition that was originally biblical, this radical opposition of the way of the world. I mean, that's what Peter's talking about, right? A radical opposition to the way of the world. Christians, he's writing to look nothing like the world. And so what's happened is it's been replaced by kind of a conformity to the way of the world. And now we're surprised when they don't want to conform any longer. So what we need is to rediscover the sense, or maybe discover it for the first time like they do in other countries, that if we don't get arrested this year, if we don't get arrested for preaching the gospel, it's been a good year. We need to rediscover that attitude. Okay? So, you know, in chapter 2, 1 Peter, verse 4 through 8, Peter says, we are like living stones. Do you see that? We are like living stones that are built into a spiritual house with Jesus as the cornerstone or the capstone. Any of you who have dealt with, you know, foundations and things, you know what he's talking about there, the cornerstone or the capstone. But notice how the cornerstone is described. Look at verse 4. He is rejected. He's rejected by men, but chosen by God and precious to him. Okay? He is, look at verse 7. The stone that the builders rejected that has become the capstone. He is, verse 8. Look at verse 8. A stone that causes men to stumble. What's going on here? Peter's using the words of Jesus. It's in Psalm 118, verse 22. He's using the very words to describe his rejection by humanity. So, Jesus is rejected by men, right? But chosen by God. And to convert that to what we were talking about last week, marginalized, pushed to the edges, like Christians are being pushed to the edges. Jesus was marginalized by the mainstream media in Jerusalem. Okay? But he was honored by God. So the cornerstone is the stone to which all other stones are aligned, right? If you get what's going on here. The stone to which we as living stones, little l, little s, we as living stones are aligned with the stone that has been rejected by men, honored by God. So we can expect what? Human rejection. But we can expect divine honor to be our experience as well. And so Peter says in verse 6 and 7 there, whoever believes in him This is powerful, and I emphasize this one. Whoever believes in him, trusts in him, will not be put to shame. And I think we're starting to feel like in a lot of ways we're going to be put to shame here by things that are going on in our world. Peter, quoting Jesus, says, no, those who trust in Jesus will not be put to shame. So the honor is for who? Those who trust, those who believe. So that's first. We cannot expect the world to be like us. And then second, I want to say that it's not our culture anymore. Now hear me. In the past, we could assume that the culture of the church was similar to the culture of the world. Or at least we could claim that to some extent. We could. Some individuals in the world might reject Christ or reject the values of the church, reject the worldview, but pretty much culture was consistent with our beliefs in Christianity. To some extent, this kind of worked in both directions. The church would claim that the world should match the culture and the values of the church, and then to some extent, because it was kind of the same, the world would expect us to match the values of the world. Okay? This was the mentality for quite some time. But we can no longer assume that the wider culture, the mainstream, matches that of the church. We can no longer assume that people share our worldviews, that people look at things the way that we do. Most people, and I don't know if this will startle you or not, I don't think it will. Most people do not believe in a personal God. They don't. Most people, the majority of people, don't believe you can have a personal relationship with God. Most people, the majority, don't believe there is only one true religion. They don't. People are in and out of the church biblically illiterate these days. Even in the church, people are completely unaware of the story of God. So when we talk about sin, when we talk about guilt, when we talk about faith, when we talk about religion or even God, we can't assume that people are understanding what we're talking about any longer. The gospel used to have more acceptability. Used to, you talked with people about the gospel, it was accepted more. We can no longer understand that when we talk about Jesus, when we talk about our God and our Jesus, that people think about him in the framework that we do with fall, redemption, our creation, fall, redemption, and future hope. That's the story we're talking about. God created the world. It fell. Christ redeemed it, and we have future hope. And we can no longer believe that people understand that when we begin to talk about Jesus. Everything has to be explained. Everything. When I was growing up, I spent a lot of time in my grandmother Bird's house. And she had a den. You couldn't sit on the couch in the living room. You had to go to the den. It had plastic on it too. But you went in the den and there was this picture in there. It looked just like this one. And right next to it was a Parade magazine framed copy of John F. Kennedy. And next to that was Franklin Roosevelt. And then a little picture of his dog. His little Scotty dog was there. And that hung her whole life. It was taken down when she died. And I don't know who got the picture. But my whole life, that's what Jesus looked like to me. He had blonde hair and blue eyes, and he was always looking away. And if you showed that picture to anybody in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, they would know who that was. That was Jesus. Well, when I came to this church, this was in the hall closet. Somebody had taken it down some time before I came. But We call it Light of Jesus now. But it was taken down, but there was this one. And there was this one. And there were two more of them. I'll just put them over here. There were two more of them hanging through the church, so there were four of them hanging, and there was this one. Warner Solomon painted these in 1941, and these are copyrighted still. You can't make a copy of these without him getting his estate getting something. But if you walked in here in 2013, this was still Jesus. I have to think today, though, if they did this picture, I think Jesus would be driving a white Lexus with white leather interior. He'd have long, flowing, curly blonde hair with some Ray-Bans pulled up and blue eyes, and his sandals would be handmade leather now. He'd have a Cuba Vera and some chinos going, and he'd be saying peace if we did Jesus today. Many people that we live with, in our neighborhoods, apartments, where we live, they have a strange mix of beliefs. Okay? Very strange mix of beliefs. They've grown up. They've grown up without any meaningful church contact. There's in their neighborhoods are full of Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and atheists and Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons and a host of other things, okay? And they believe about religions what we believe about denominations, right? We talk about denominations. Well, they're all kind of the same, right? And fundamentally they're kind of the same. Well, they think that about religions. They're all kind of the same. And so I've talked and I've had a number of conversations when I talk to people about Jesus. They say, "Oh, you're talking about a religion." And I say, no. They assume we're calling them to some type of religion. And some kind of vague, a spiritualness or something, where they're free to interpret who then they think Jesus is. And that's what they do. They decide for themselves who they think Jesus is. Kim ran into someone the other day who said, when she told him, she's a pastor's wife, and he said, "Oh, I believe in Jesus. I'm a Christian and a Buddhist." And he told her, "Jesus makes me feel good about myself. But if I need something, I go to Buddha." Okay? He's an Asian man now living in the United States. Somebody told him about Jesus and probably said he loves you, okay, and wants you to feel loved. So this man thought, great, because Buddha doesn't make me feel loved at all. He makes me work hard for the thing. So I'll just bring Jesus in with my Buddha, and I can have both. What does our Bible say about that? No, but that's not the message. They assume we're calling them to some spiritual responsiveness. But hear me, simply to call these kind of people who believe this way to a faith with Christ as their Savior is meaningless to them. To tell these people you need Jesus as your Savior means nothing. You know why? Because they don't know who Jesus is. And they don't know what faith is. And they don't know why they need saving. And they don't even know what they need saving from. They don't. And so, in the past, many neighbors, when we would talk to them, or people we work with, they could understand. They had some basic understanding of who Jesus was. And they understood Christian preaching. You might bring them to a revival. You might bring them to a special meeting. And they would have either responded, or they might have just said, "Well, I don't believe that," or I'm indifferent to that. Might have been the response. You know what, though? During the last 20 years, it's not indifference anymore. It's not a disagreement. It's hostility. The world is acting towards Christianity with absolute hostility now. Until a generation ago, in the U.S., most adult people had a very similar moral instinct about themselves. We believe pretty similar. And you know, whether they were born again Christians or believers or just churchgoers or even nominal churchgoers or even non-believers, we kind of thought morally the same way. That has changed. That has changed. And so, something I've done for some time, but something that is now very common, is this claim that the West, the United States, is a mission field. No one denies it. No one anymore denies it, except for people who are completely out of touch with reality. That would be who would deny that we don't live in a mission field. But there's a big gap between talking about it and doing something about it. I hear it all the time. I believe that they say the United States has become a mission field. Well, what are you going to do about it? You know what you need in a mission field? You need missionaries, right? So one of the measures of that gap, one of the measures of what we're going to do about this gap is whether we're willing or, in fact, that we might be unwilling to learn from the experience of those who have gone into the mission field in the church around the world. If we really believed we were a mission field, if we truly believed that, church, then we would be studying third world Christians and the way they shared the gospel throughout the world. Okay, we'd be studying how people shared the gospel in China and South America and Africa. We'd be trying to figure out how they did that. And we would be looking to operate as missionaries living in another culture. You know, you look at 1 Peter, and there's no charts. There's no PowerPoints. There's no, model that Peter left of what it would look like. Instead, what does he do? Instead, he describes this new identity of his readers, and it's that new identity, being born again, that inevitably shapes their engagement with their neighbors, with lost people, in a gospel-centered way. And so, at a number of key moments, Peter says, and we started with one today, these are key moments that in a way that turns identity into action. In chapter 1, verse 13, and then again in chapter 2, he says, therefore, or so, because you've been born again, therefore, because you've been born again, so. Okay? So putting the identity into action. So there's this repeated reference of this is what it means to walk like a Christian. So Peter shows how our new identity as the people in God enables us to live in places where people are going to push us to the margins and push our morals and our values to the margin as world changers. Jesus was pushed to the margins. He was rejected and he changed the world. And that's what Peter's trying to say. I need you to be world changers from the margins. You're not going to change the world as the president or a senator or the head of the PTA or the principal of a school or the CEO of a business. You're going to do it from the margins. Okay, I'm going to use you to change one or two or three people at a time, and we're going to change the world. You're going to be rejected, but we're going to change the world. See, this isn't Jesus. You are. This has never been Jesus. Jesus never wanted his picture to be painted or portrayed. And it's okay if you have one in your house. I'm not trying. It's okay. But I look at your faces. You're Jesus. I'm Jesus. That's what Peter meant. He's saying Jesus wants us to be his face. You're born again. You're a new identity. I need you to be Jesus. And when you watch the news and you listen up, you know what I need you to do? I need you to be Jesus. That's what I need you to do when you hear these stories in these courts. Be Jesus. That's the answer to all of the questions. Just be Jesus. And then lastly, quickly, third, rediscovering the culture. That's the last thing. Recognizing our missionary setting means we can no longer assume that the church, that the world understands us as a church, or that the church understands the culture. And so we need to rediscover, we need to relearn the culture around us. We need to get to know our neighbor. We need to get to know its people, and we need to know their stories. We need to find out their values. We need to see their worldview, okay? Get involved in their culture. We need to ask the kind of questions that missionaries ask when they come into a neighborhood and they enter a new culture, and we need to start now. We need to do it today. And that's my prayer. Let me pray for us. Father, I thank you for this day, and I thank you for this word. And Father, I know that we are overwhelmed sometimes at what comes in the media and the news and the courts, and it's overwhelming us, Father. But your servant Peter, this letter may as well have been written to Dallas, to us this morning, where you're saying, don't look to your laws, don't look to your government, look to my Son, Jesus. He's the cornerstone. He is that which you should measure yourself by. Father, help us to measure ourselves only by Jesus. Father, it's my prayer that anyone here this morning that has come with a heavy heart or a questioning mind will hear your word. And those of us that do trust, that do believe, Father, we will not be shamed. We will not be shamed. I pray this in your Son's precious name.